Slide 13A, which is from the Department of Energy in October of 2011. It states that in April 2010, you expected to sell 14,000 Karmas in 2011. And in reality, though, we know that production for the Karma did not start until September of that year. And as of this presentation, which is actually a presentation in October of 2011, it was estimated that you would sell 542 Karmas by the end of the year. So we go from 14,000 to 542 Karmas. Did you actually sell 542 Karmas in 2011?
Congressman, let me clarify. In a ramp-up in a production, then the production numbers are very low in the first several months, and as the production moved to the end of the year, obviously we were looking at a very low production ramp, and I believe we sold about 280, between 250 to 300 cars by the end of 2011.
So you went from 14,000 in the first part of the year. You ramped up, and we went and revised the estimate to 542. But then within 3-month time period, you couldn't accurately project how many cars you were going to do, and you ended up at half the number you projected in the fall of 2011. Is that correct?
Well, Congressman, as our production was delayed, it was very hard to estimate before we had the final certification and everything was done. So it was literally week by week, and even if you miss a week, you miss obviously production.
All right. So let's say we missed that, and let's go on and go on to the next slide, because can you look at this slide, which is slide number 15? This is from the Department of Energy's review of the loan application from 2009, and it stated that you would sell over 7,000 Karmas in 2010, 15,000 between 2010 and 2013. You would come up with some 60,000 Atlantic, the new version, by that 2011 time frame, and another 60,000 by 2012. My question is, how in the world did you convince anybody that you could do this kind of production when you didn't even produce 1% of that?
Congressman, could I have a copy of that?
Sure, we'll be glad to provide that for you. But we had unbelievable estimates of over 120,000 vehicles. You know, I would say that we misnamed the car. It shouldn't be the Karma, it should be the Karnak. And that's how we come up with these numbers.
Congressman, as I look at these numbers from far away, I would like just to double check the document.
I mean, this was part of the review process for the loan that we were going through with Mr. Wickham and his agency. And so you were coming up with all these numbers based on what?
Congressman, this is not numbers from the final business plan submitted to the DOE. This is not the correct document.
Okay. Well, how many did you estimate? Because we've got a number of documents we'll be glad to provide, and maybe these are some that you can answer directly. How many did you estimate that you would build?
So when we were working on due diligence in 2009 for the Department of Energy loan and for the business plan, we invited all our dealers in the U.S., our importers worldwide, to help us confirm the numbers. We also had, through the DOE that did due diligence, A.T. Kearney come out and verify our projected sales numbers, and everybody were verifying the numbers that we submitted to the final, to DOE in the final form.
So you're saying these are incorrect. What are the correct numbers? How many did you estimate that you would build? Yeah, of the new car that was supposed to be built in the United States, not the one in Finland?
These ones here are incorrect. I don't have the final numbers in my head of all the different years, but this is incorrect.
I would assume that you lived, breathed, and ate, automobile for a long period of time. So you know what the expectation was. How many? Just very simply, we'll let you be plus or minus 1,000. What was the number?
So when we submitted the final plan, and we had already worked on the vehicle for 2 years, and after invited dealers out, as I said, and built up our dealer network, we projected the initial Karma volume, I believe about 11,000 until for the first year.
Okay, and so you didn't do anywhere close to 11,000 the first year.
Well,
200, was it 200? What was your testimony? 200?
Well, as I said before, there was a ramp up, so you cannot really count that as the first year.
Okay, well, to date, how many have you produced? 2,000?
Well, as I mentioned in my statement, we came into several unfortunate events that hit us like a domino effect.
So you're saying that you didn't produce enough cars because of Hurricane Sandy? Is that your testimony today?
My testimony is that we hit several unfortunate events, such as the bankruptcy of our battery suppliers, such as recalls from a faulty battery, and obviously that had a very strong impact on consumer confidence. It takes one day to take down consumer confidence, but several months to build it back up.
So your failure is not based on any negligence or lack of due diligence on your part. It's all these external factors. Is that correct?
We did, as I said, a lot of due diligence back in 2009, not only us internally, but with our recognized dealer body here in the U.S. as well as international importers. A.T. Kearney, which is a recognized marketing firm.
So when you got approved for the loan from this taxpayer-funded loan, how many cars had you built at that particular time?
When we got the initial approval, the car was still under development.
So you had 0 cars that had been produced when you got the loan?
The car was still in development.
Okay. So that's 0. Is that correct?
That's
yes
correct.
or no?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So let's go a little bit further. Slide 17, this is from March 3rd of 2010. It's an email where it talks about that Fisker was originally rejected by the CRB since the manufacturing was to be outsourced to Finland. Okay, so no U.S. jobs. The deal was amended to pull in the next stage of Fisker cars that never got built, by the way, to be manufactured in the United States. Since Fisker had yet to build the first generation model, I thought it was very risky to lend against a second generation, which I would agree with, but that was what was required to, quote, meet the policy requirements.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order. I think in fairness to the witnesses, they should have these documents in front of them instead of having to try to squint and read them off.
We'll be glad to do that, Mr. Chairman. Can you get them copies, please?
Thank you. Staff will take documents to the witnesses.
All right, but meeting the policy requirements. And so that policy requirement, I guess, would be that we would want to create American jobs. Is that correct? Is that the policy we're talking about?
We had, in fact, up to 600 jobs at Fisker Automotive during any point, one point in time here in the U.S., and every money we spent from the Department of Energy loan was spent here in the U.S. No money went to Finland whatsoever.
All right, so out of all the money that we spent, you spent it all here in the United States, but that allowed you to take private equity and spend on the production of the cars in Finland. Is that correct?
The money that was spent here in the U.S. was basically receipts that was given to the DOE to make sure that this money was spent here, that the money was already spent here in the U.S., and we then got compensated from the DOE on that particular amount that was spent here in the U.S. developing advanced technology and creating jobs here in the U.S.
All right. So as we start to look at this, let me go a little bit further. Based on this email, can you explain this to me? It appears that they made the loan based on faith, not on any real due diligence, because their comment is that it is very risky to loan on a second-generation car when the first-generation car, as your testimony just admitted, had never been produced. So we have no cars, and yet we're loaning on a second, better, improved car.
Well, first of all, I can't speak on behalf of the DOE what they're
would you have made the same kind of loan?
Well, yes, at that time, I would say that we had a very good development process already. We already got very far with development of our powertrain. We had already spent 2 years developing the powertrain and the car by the time we got Department of Energy loan. In fact, we had already started the second-generation car before we were awarded Department of Energy loan in April.
But according to some of the documents I've read, there's only 60% of that actually translated over to that second-generation car. So the work you do on the first generation, there's only 60% that would translate over.
Well, the important part is translate over, of course, the powertrain. The technology is the point that's very important. It was a second-generation technology that was lower cost, higher volume. That's really the important part in this whole process, to start out with a technology that's expensive, just like when the flat-screen TV was $20,000, today it's $500. That, I think, is a recognized model in any new technology. You start out with expensive, then...
Yeah, but most of the time, we are already producing TVs when we do that. I can see I'm out of time. I've got several other questions that I'll submit for the record. At this, what happens is we started here with Vice President Biden. He's talking about billions and billions and billions of jobs. He says, we're going to write a new chapter. And then he came back to say, again, we're going to rewrite a new chapter. You know, and I think he's probably right, but the chapter is Chapter 7. It is not a new chapter in automobile history. I yield back.